Now that COVID vaccinations are within reach, employers are asking, what can we and should we do or not do when it comes to vaccinating the workplace? Because this is such a hot topic, it might go a little bit longer than normal, but why don't we go ahead and jump right in? Robin, let's start there with our threshold question. Can employers require their employees to receive a COVID-19 vaccine?
Thanks, Susan. The answer is yes, but there are, of course, a few caveats. While there's no specific authority regarding COVID-19 vaccines, past EEOC guidance has that dealt with the H1N1 pandemic in 2009 provides employers with a framework that they can use to require employees to take COVID-19 specific vaccines, with two main exceptions. First, employers have to reasonably accommodate employees who have an ADA-covered disability that prevents them from taking a vaccine, unless providing the accommodation would constitute an undue hardship for the employer's business. Now, the media has reported several instances of individuals who have had what are being called severe allergic reactions to the vaccine in the UK. And the UK has asked people who've had severe reactions to hold off on being vaccinated while the reactions are being investigated. There's ADA case law that considered allergies in the context of vaccines, with at least one court holding that commonplace allergies typically don't rise to the level of a protected disability, while another court found that an employee's severe anxiety about the side effects of a vaccine might constitute a protected disability that would need to be accommodated. In the US, the FDA has advised that individuals with a history of allergic reactions, or those who are on immunosuppressive therapies or are pregnant and breastfeeding, should consult with a physician before taking the vaccine. Those are examples of health-related reasons that employees may have or request accommodations for in response to mandatory vaccine policy. Putting aside the disability issue, employers also have an obligation to attempt to reasonably accommodate severely held religious beliefs or practices under Title VII. And in some cases, an employee's religious beliefs may prohibit or prevent them from taking a vaccine. Again, there's an undue burden standard in this context, but I'll point out that the undue burden for religious accommodation is much lower than it is for disability accommodation. It typically just means more than a de minimis cost or burden for the employer. It's also important to remember that there are state and local statutes that prohibit religious or disability discrimination, and those statutes often impose different standards than the ADA or Title VII. And requiring employees to be vaccinated against COVID-19 does constitute a medical procedure within the meaning of the ADA. And that's permissible now while COVID-19 is severe in our community, but that may not be the case in the future if COVID-19 no longer constitutes a direct threat to the workplace. So there's a timing element that employers also need to follow.
And Emily, this one's for you. If employers decide to be on the safe side overall and mandate a COVID vaccine for their workforce, what are the liabilities that employers should be concerned about? Are there any immunity provisions that employers should know about? It's the no good deed goes unpunished concern.
Exactly. So, as Robin mentioned, there have been instances of severe allergic reaction that have been reported in the UK so far. I guess in the US, based on trials, there's been reported side effects, mostly mild headache, fever, fatigue, and joint and muscle pain. But it remains to be seen whether or not an adverse reaction could occur on a wider scale here in the US. So this is, kind of developing as we speak. But if employers mandate that their employees take the vaccine, employers should brace themselves for claims if an employee suffers an adverse reaction. And so possible claims include claims based on negligence, violation of workplace safety compliance standards, workplace injury or wrongful death, claims related to requested but denied sick leave, and workers' compensation claims. So employers could also face claims for violation of workplace privacy standards if, for example, that confidential medical information is breached, it's somehow disclosed. You could also be facing claims of religious and accommodation discrimination under the ADA and Title VII if you're not giving exemptions to people who request, some type of exception to the vaccination. Other claims that could arise include potentially disparate impact claims of discrimination by individuals of certain ethnic communities who may be more reluctant to take the vaccination. So if you have a policy that requires your employees be vaccinated, and there's, a certain minority group that, I think the reports show, the polling shows that the Black and Latino communities are generally more resistant or hesitant or reluctant to get the vaccination. So that could have a disparate impact on that group of employees. So you want to make sure that your policy doesn't disparately impact certain groups. Employers would be wise to contact their insurance carriers in advance to find out how their insurance carriers would handle claims like workers' compensation claims related to a vaccine. And Susan, you mentioned the issue of immunity. There may be state and local laws in place that provide a certain level of immunity for employers. In addition, employers may have immunity under the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act, the PrEP Act. And that's once vaccination guidance is provided by federal, state, and local authorities. So under the PrEP Act, employers who administer vaccinations in accordance with public health and medical response and emergency declarations of federal, state, or local authorities may have immunity to certain claims related to the vaccination. So if an employer sets up, administers, or supervises a program at the work site or elsewhere for the employees to receive vaccinations, an employer would likely be covered under the PrEP Act and may be entitled to some type of immunity. Liability immunity under the PrEP Act includes claims related to side effects from taking the vaccination, as well as claims relating to the management and operation of vaccine distribution program or site, like if somebody were to slip and fall while they're getting a vaccine, or if there was a vehicle collision by a recipient that had received a vaccine. So the liability under the PrEP Act begins on the date of an emergency declaration, and it lasts through the final day of the emergency declaration that's in effect, or October 1st, 2024, whichever date occurs first.